So from an organisational perspective, there is very little benefit in competing on security. In fact, it should be something that organisations openly cooperate, share information, share threat data, share techniques and approaches that they're using in order to benefit the greater organisation. It's not dissimilar to the concept of herd immunity, where the larger group benefits from individuals being immunised or thereabouts for security threats. So in this manner, you can ensure that by providing information to other organisations about things you're seeing, approaches you're taking, techniques, methodologies, then you are getting the benefit of their learnings as well, and the group overall benefits. In my experience, one of the biggest things is that the role needs to be someone who's able to influence very well. For a long time, security gets sort of viewed as a department of no. If you need to stop a project, send it to security, they'll kill it for you. And that's long since gone, and it needs to be that security is seen as a way where we, as a business, we make a decision that we want to deploy an application, a system, a service, whatever it is. And security's role is to make sure that's done safely. At the end of the day, and you mentioned it before, it's about business risk and business acceptance. And part of that then is security educating the various people within the business to say, you can do this, but here's the risks, help you weigh them up and make an informed decision. So rather than it being about a yes-no, it needs to be more about a risk-based approach and helping the organisation come into a decision with as much information as possible and able to distill that down to what's relevant for them and be able to make the right decision for the business. Security has to be quite pervasive across every level of the organisation, from the lowest member of staff, because they have responsibility for data security, all the way through to the CIO, the CEO, the CFO, because they're the ones that will represent security to their business peers as being something that we need to do. So the security, the manager, the CISO, whatever the role is, has to have those relationships in order to ensure that they are across the organisation, both at a technology level and also at a data level.
Yeah.
I also think some of it is about getting the fundamentals right. Like, if we were sitting in this room 5 years ago, we'd be talking about patch management, and today patch management is still a core fundamental of information security. There was Verizon had a report recently about the major breaches, and the 10 vulnerabilities were responsible for 97% of the breaches that were experienced. So, and these are organisations like JP Morgan Chase and Target, and these they're household names, but even with all the funding and the awareness of security, they still struggle to do patch management. So I mentioned before, one of the other things was around being aware of your information assets. Where is your information? What is it? Simon talked about knowing about where all your pieces of data are, what's the relevant piece of legislation, what would happen if that got out into the public, that sort of thing. That's fairly boring, basic types of security activities, but it is absolutely crucial if you're going to be able to then add on any sort of advanced analytics or big data or anything like that. If you don't get the fundamentals right, the rest of it won't really make a lot of difference. We're also seeing some of the research we're doing, and it's sort of correlated elsewhere, is suggesting that actually Australia's a bit of a test bed for hacking groups and attackers. We have, in a relative sense, we're quite isolated, particularly our banking environment, these sorts of things. Our infrastructure is quite isolated. Obviously, geographically, we're isolated. So for attack groups, it's actually quite useful. It's a very useful laboratory for them to launch attacks from, see what happens, tune, and then move on. So we are seeing that often a lot of things like point-of-sale malware, SCADA malware, these sorts of things actually start to originate in the Australian region first. Then you'll see variants and tweaks made to that before it's launched into the US, continental Asia, these sorts of things. So I guess there's an element where some organisations think, oh, we're a small organisation, we're in Australia, who would care? Well, actually, you're pretty attractive. You provide a really nice service to attackers to see how it will play out for you and for them.
Beta testing.
Yeah, a bit of beta testing. These guys are professionals, and it is interesting to see that over time these organisations do operate like a business. They run a 9 to 5. You can actually see, if you study their activity, you can actually see things like they have a coffee break about 10 or 11. They have an afternoon tea break about 3 o'clock. They clock off at 5 or 6. Like the activity graphs, if you shift the timescale to say, I don't know, China, GMT zone, then it maps exactly to your standard workday because they operate like a business. They have source code repositories. They have beta testing. They operate like us. It's just that their business is your business.